The night the sea swallowed my home, I realized blood ties don't always mean safety. My name is Liora Quang Reyes. I'm 60 years old, and I've mapped oceans my whole life. I thought I understood the tides, but nothing prepared me for the tide that rose inside my own family. It started on an October evening in 2049, when the floating district of Cascade Array glittered like a necklace of lights across the Puget Sound. I was in my skiff, returning from a long day charting currents, when the horizon behind me erupted in fire. My house, the modular float I'd lived in for 2 decades, was burning, groaning as metal struts twisted under heat. Within minutes, the flames spread, licking across the water until the whole structure gave a final shriek and collapsed into the sea. I remember standing there, knuckles white around the tiller, as if gripping harder could keep 30 years of memories from sinking. My husband's journals, the maps I'd drawn by hand, the photographs of Daniel as a boy, they all hissed into smoke and salt water. I did what any mother would do. I called my son. "Daniel," my voice cracked. "The house is gone. I don't even have a bed tonight." For a second, I heard only the faint hum of his drafting console in the background. Then his voice came, hesitant. "Mom, Aria says the commune's rules don't allow outsiders, even family. She's under stress right now." I froze. "Daniel, I'm not an outsider. I'm your mother. I just need a place to sleep." But before he could answer, I heard her voice smooth, low, carrying that strange authority she always wrapped around him. "If you let her stay, I'm leaving for my mother's." Click, line dead. That was the moment the world tilted. The flames in my rear view weren't just destroying a house, they were burning through the last bridge between me and my son. That night, I curled up in the cabin of a rescue dinghy, the salt wind cutting through every layer of clothing, listening to the water slap the hull like a cruel metronome. And I whispered to myself, if my own blood abandons me, then the sea will have to teach me how to rise again. People always imagine betrayal comes with knives in the dark or screaming matches. No. In my case, it came with a smile that smelled of jasmine tea and honey. Her name was Aria Vale. At least that's what she called herself then. The first time Daniel brought her home, I remember her hands, soft, uncalloused, manicured in a way that didn't match his calloused engineer's palms. She looked around my floating house not with curiosity, but with calculation, as if every bookshelf, every family photo was inventory to be appraised. "Such a quaint space," she murmured, running a fingertip across my old nautical maps. "Daniel, don't you think this place anchors you too much in the past?" I should have known then. It started small, phase 1 doubt. At dinners, she'd tilt her head with faux innocence. "Liora, don't you think you're interfering a little in Daniel's choices? He's grown now. He doesn't need guidance every step of the way." Guidance. That was her word for love. She made motherhood sound like a disease. Then came phase 2, distance. They moved into the Lamb T-1EF1 commune, 2 hours north on a refurbished oil platform. "It's for Aria's wellness work," Daniel said, eyes glowing with borrowed conviction. A commune with rules about purity, silence, and energetic boundaries. But what it really meant was calls grew fewer. Visits always got canceled at the last second. When I rang, Aria's soft voice would answer. "Oh, Daniel's meditating, Daniel's on retreat, Daniel needs to preserve his aura." My son, who once built radio towers out of scrap with me, was suddenly too fragile to pick up the phone. And then phase 3, holidays. Thanksgiving. Aria had seasickness from spiritual fasting. Christmas. She needed a darkness retreat and couldn't be disturbed. So I microwaved frozen turkey alone while their photos popped up on social feeds, luxury spas, neon-lit galas, everything Aria had sworn she despised. The silence inside my home grew thick, almost alive. It was like someone had surgically cut me out of Daniel's world and stitched the wound shut. By the time the fire swallowed my house, she had already burned my place in his life. I was no longer mom. I was the interference. And yet, as I sat in that rescue dinghy watching sparks drift over black water, I swore something. She might think she's erased me, but I am not so easily deleted. Rock bottom doesn't feel like a crash. It feels like slow erosion, dignity peeling away grain by grain. After the fire, the insurance company gave me the kind of smile sharks must practice in mirrors. Wildfire claims require extended investigation. Translation: we'll bleed you dry before we cut a check. So I bled. First in a dingy motel off Highway 20, $79 a night for stained sheets and coffee that tasted like rusted nails. When the savings evaporated, I graduated to the back seat of my skiff, tucked under a torn tarp, rocking with the tide like some discarded relic. Every creak of the hull was a reminder, you don't belong anywhere anymore. And the worst part, not a single call from Daniel, not even a text to ask if I was breathing. My son was 20 miles away in Aria's steel-end glass commune, while I brushed my teeth in gas station sinks. The only human kindness came from Miguel, the night watchman at the marina. He'd pass by my skiff, flashlight swinging, and whisper, "Senora Reyes, you holding up?" Sometimes he'd sneak me a thermos of real coffee. A stranger with a flashlight cared more for me than my own blood. By week 5, my reflection looked like a ghost, cheekbones sharp, eyes hollow, and I thought, is this what the rest of my life will be? Invisible, disposable. Then, like fate had a twisted sense of timing, my phone buzzed with a Boston area code. I almost didn't answer. Creditors love to call desperate people. "Mrs. Reyes," a crisp voice said. "This is *** attorney James Whitmore and Patterson. I'm calling regarding the estate of Isabella Quang." My knees buckled. Aunt Isabella, my mother's eccentric sister, the family's black swan. She'd lived in Beacon Hill, collected rare wines, and cut ties with anyone who begged her for money. She hadn't spoken to me in years. "She left a note," the attorney continued. "Said you were the only family member who never asked her for a dime. You are the sole beneficiary of her estate, approximate value $5-7 million. I nearly dropped the phone into the water. 5.7 million, and not just cash, salvage rights, mineral royalties, a key to a life I thought had drowned with my house. For the first time in months, I laughed, a raw, cracked sound that startled even me. Miguel poked his head from the dock, confused, but I just shook my head, grinning at the dark sky. Rock bottom hadn't been the end. It had been the launch pad. And if Aria thought she'd erased me, she was about to learn. You cannot delete a woman who just inherited the ocean. Wealth doesn't just change your circumstances. It changes the way silence sounds. 3 weeks after that phone call, I wasn't rocking in a skiff anymore. I was standing barefoot in the glass-walled kitchen of a cliffside villa in Port Townsend, a property that used to belong to a retired admiral. 5 bedrooms. A wine cellar carved into stone, windows that opened onto nothing but Pacific horizon. I walked from room to room like a ghost testing her new body. The air smelled of cedar and salt, not mildew. The walls didn't groan under wind, they held. Every faucet poured hot water like it was no big deal. For the first time since the fire, I felt my lungs expand without ache. But peace was only half the point. The other half, letting the sharks smell blood in the water. I snapped a photograph one evening, my feet on the balcony railing, ocean stretching into forever. Caption: "Sometimes the best views come after the worst storms." I hit post, then I waited. It took exactly 90 minutes. My phone lit up. Daniel. His voice was cautious, almost rehearsed. "Mom, I saw your post. That view looks expensive. Where exactly are you?" I let a smile curl across my lips. "Didn't you hear? Aunt Isabella left me everything. Salvage rights, royalties. I just picked up a little place by the water, nothing fancy." There was a pause. I could hear the gears turning in his head, the disbelief trying to rearrange itself into joy. Wow, I'm so happy for you, Mom. You deserve this. Deserve. Interesting choice of word from a son who let me sleep in a boat. 2 hours later, my notifications exploded. A message from Aria herself, wrapped in sugar and silk. Mother Reyes, what a stunning view. Daniel and I would absolutely love to visit your beautiful new home. It feels like the perfect chance to reconnect as family. Of course, the same woman who once declared me energetic interference suddenly rediscovered the value of family right after I inherited a fortune and a fortress. I set the phone down on the marble counter, the Pacific wind teasing my hair, and whispered to the empty room. Good. Come closer. Let's see what you're really hunting for. If Aria Vale wanted to swim into my waters, I was going to make sure the net was waiting. I started with the house itself. The cliffside villa already had good bones, reinforced glass, storm shutters, a panic room built by the admiral who once owned it. But I wanted more. I called in Captain Noor Al-Karim, a friend of a friend in the Coast Guard. She was the kind of woman whose handshake made you check your pockets afterward, sharp, direct, impossible to fool. She walked through the house with a small scanner strapped to her wrist, eyes narrowing at every corner. You want comprehensive coverage? She asked. I want to know the moment a mosquito sneezes in this place. She smirked. That I can do. Within days, the villa was alive with invisible eyes. Pinhead cameras tucked into molding, directional mics hidden behind decorative panels. Even the wine cellar had a discreet lens staring down from the beams. Everything fed into a console in my study, my private war room. But surveillance alone wasn't enough. I needed bait. So, with Noor's help, I built a digital illusion, forged portfolios showing offshore accounts, exaggerated royalties from the salvage rights, even a shadow deed to a non-existent second property on Bainbridge Island, all displayed on a sleek tablet, left casually unlocked on my desk like I had nothing to hide. If Aria was what I suspected, her eyes would go there like iron to a magnet. And while Noor handled the tech, I handled my mask. I practiced smiles in the mirror, warm, forgiving, maternal. I rehearsed lines in my head. Of course you should feel at home here, of course family comes first. The kind of words a mark expects to hear before they lower their guard. Every evening, I'd walk the balcony, ocean roaring below, whispering to the waves. Come on, Aria, step into my map. I'll show you currents you can't swim against. By the time their visit was confirmed, the house was ready. The stage set, the cameras humming, the bait gleaming. And me, I wasn't the shipwrecked widow anymore. I was the cartographer of this battlefield, every contour charted, every trap placed. They arrived on a Friday afternoon, the sky bruised with autumn storm clouds. Daniel came first, lugging 2 weekend bags, his smile boyish, hopeful, almost desperate for me to embrace him the way I used to. But behind him floated Aria Vale, draped in white linen that caught the sea breeze like a halo. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was some healer descending from the heavens. Mother Reyes, she breathed, arms outstretched, eyes glistening. This place is absolutely magical. I can feel the energy, it's so healing. Healing. That word tasted like salt on a wound. I hugged her, polite, even warm. Cameras tucked in the molding above the door caught every angle. Her wide smile, her darting eyes, the quick scan she gave the foyer like she was appraising merchandise. Daniel squeezed me a little tighter. Mom, I'm glad we're here. This feels good. His voice cracked on the word good as if he were trying to convince himself. The house tour began. I let Aria lead herself like a curious guest while secretly watching her from my console in the study. Every lens, every mic recorded the performance. In the wine cellar, her pupils widened at the sight of bottles older than the commune she ran. She ran her finger along a 1982 Burgundy like it was a lover's arm. Click, camera caught it. In the master suite, She lingered on the floor-to-ceiling windows, then opened the closet doors, eyes sparkling at the empty shelves as if imagining them filled with her silk dresses. Click. She never once asked about family photos. She never paused at Daniel's childhood pictures on the hall wall. Her gaze always locked on value, things to take, not memories to share. At dinner, she put on the full mask, hands folded, voice soft, questions sugar-coated. Liora, don't you think it would bring peace of mind if Daniel had access, just in case something were to happen to you here on the cliffs? I laughed lightly, passing her the salad. That's very thoughtful, dear. Let's talk more about that later. The mic in the chandelier caught every syllable. To Daniel, it probably looked like reconciliation, mother and fiancé bonding over wine and candlelight. But from my vantage point in the console, it was a documentary. Every gesture, every feigned tear, every greedy glance was evidence in the making. She thought she was playing hostess. She didn't know I was recording her audition for prison. That night, as waves pounded the rocks below, I sat in the darkened study watching the replays. Frame by frame, her angel's mask slipping in micro-expressions. The hungry smirk, the calculating pause, and I whispered to the screen, "Keep smiling, Aria. The cameras love you." Saturday afternoon, Daniel napped by the pool, lulled by salt air and wine. Aria excused herself with that porcelain smile. "I'll just take a quick call, dear." She glided into the guest suite, door closing softly behind her. What she didn't know, the mic in the smoke detector was live, feeding every syllable into my console. At first, just static. Then her voice, stripped of its honey, sharp, clipped, commanding. "It's even better than the photos," she whispered. "The wine cellar alone could fund retirement. And the salvage rights. She leaves those papers lying around like grocery lists." A man's voice crackled back deep, gravelly. "You're sure about the schedule?" "Yes, Marcus, 2 more weeks. I'll have everything documented, then we execute. By Christmas, we're gone somewhere with no extradition. 8 figures minimum." My breath caught. Marcus. The same name that had surfaced in Noor's background checks, ex-military, dishonorable discharge, a trail of shell companies across coastal towns. Aria's tone softened, almost giddy. "She trusts me now, calls me dear. She's even hinting about updating her will. Daniel's too blind to see. Once we lock down access, the rest is just fire and tide." Fire and tide, 2 words that turned my blood cold. The man chuckled. "And the son? Collateral, he sleeps like a child. The fire will look like faulty wiring. Tragic accident, no survivors." I nearly crushed the glass in my hand. My son, my only child, wasn't her partner. He was her next victim. Then the line went quiet. I replayed the recording 3 times, each playback stabbing deeper. The greed, the precision, the utter lack of hesitation. Aria Vale wasn't just a manipulator. She was a predator, rehearsing Daniel's obituary before he even knew he was in danger. I closed the console, heart hammering, whispering into the empty study. "All right, Aria, you've declared war. Now let's see how you like playing on my battlefield." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the study with the ocean raging against the cliffs, replaying Aria's call until the words, "tragic accident," "no survivors," etched themselves into my skull. By dawn, Captain Noor was back at my door, reins still clinging to her Coast Guard jacket. She listened to the recording, jaw tightening with every word. When it ended, she leaned back, eyes steady on mine. "You've got enough here to raise alarms," she said, "but not enough to bury her. She's careful. She'll spin manipulation into misunderstanding. We need her caught in the act." So we built a plan. Step 1, bait. With Noor's cyber unit contacts, we crafted digital documents, fake offshore accounts, salvage royalties doubled in size, property deeds for non-existent ocean plots. They lived on a sleek tablet I left casually on my desk, half covered by nautical charts. To Aria, it would look like the mother lode. Step 2, traps. We upgraded the surveillance. Noor's team slid fiber-thin cameras into air vents, fitted thermal sensors into lamp bases, even laced the wine cellar with micro-lasers that triggered whenever someone tampered with the bottles. My villa became less a home, more a stage wired for evidence. Step 3, timing. We arranged a second visit, longer this time. "Why don't you both stay for a week?" I cooed over dinner. "It'll give us time to really bond." Daniel's face lit up. Aria's eyes glimmered like a shark catching scent of blood. And finally, step 4, the net. We coordinated with federal investigators. Noor promised a strike team would be stationed within minutes' reach, waiting for the moment Aria crossed the line from greedy guest to criminal conspirator. As we mapped it out across the kitchen table, rain hammering the skylights above, Noor studied me. "You understand, once we spring this, your son will see everything. It could break him." I pressed my palm flat against the table, steady. Better a broken heart than a burnt body. For the first time since the fire, I felt something stronger than grief coursing through me. Not just survival, not just vengeance. This was justice, shaped by my own hands. The storm rolled in on schedule, as if the sky itself wanted front-row seats. Wind howled through the pines, waves clawed at the cliffs, and lightning split the horizon like a photographer's flash. Inside my villa, I set the stage. Lights dimmed. Generators shifted into standby mode, a deliberate vulnerability Noor and I had engineered. The cameras blinked red in hidden corners, recording every breath. Daniel thought it was a family retreat. He sat by the fire with a book, oblivious. Aria, she was pacing the hallways, her white linen dress replaced with a fitted storm jacket, eyes sharp, restless, a predator sensing the hunt was near. Around midnight, while Daniel dozed off, Aria slipped into the guest suite. I watched her through the console. She pulled out a sleek comm device shielded by her palm and whispered, "It's time. The house is ready. Faulty circuits will cover it. You've got the accelerants." The reply came faint but clear, Marcus. "Already placed. Pylons under the cliff. Once the surge hits, the whole system goes up. By dawn, it'll look like a collapse." I felt ice slide down my spine. They weren't just planning a fire, they were sabotaging the foundation. My villa wasn't just a home. It was sitting on layered cliff supports wired to energy conduits. If they detonated, the house would tumble straight into the ocean, with me and Daniel inside. I glanced at Noor's live feed. Her strike team huddled in rain gear on a cutter just offshore, waiting for my signal. Aria ended her call and moved to my study, right where I'd left the bait. Her fingers grazed the tablet, screen lighting up to reveal millions in accounts, her face lit with hunger. She pulled a microcam from her pocket and began photographing every page. Click, click, click. Each snapshot was one nail deeper into her coffin. I leaned close to the console mic and whispered the code word to Noor. "Net's closing." Outside, thunder boomed like a war drum. Inside, my heart pounded in rhythm. Aria thought she was minutes from victory. But what she didn't know was that the storm wasn't cleansing my house. It was cleansing her mask. Tomorrow, she wouldn't wake up free. She'd wake up in chains. The storm reached its crescendo, rain slamming the glass, wind shrieking through the pines. Inside, Aria was crouched over my desk, photographing the forged portfolios with surgical precision. She thought the thunder was her cover. She didn't know it was my drum roll. Daniel wandered into the hall, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Aria, what are you doing in Mom's study?" She spun, smile snapping back on like a mask. "Oh, darling, I was just admiring her maps. They're beautiful, aren't they?" She slid the microcam into her sleeve so smoothly even magicians would have applauded. But she hadn't noticed the tiny red LED blinking above her head. Every lie, every movement, every stolen image was streaming straight to federal servers. I stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the hall. "Daniel," I said softly, "stay with me." He frowned. "Mom, what's going on?" Before I could answer, the front door burst open with the force of the gale itself. Captain Noor strode in, soaked in rain, flanked by agents in dark jackets emblazoned with federal investigator across the chest. Aria Vale, also known as Ava Volkov, Noor's voice cut like steel. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted murder, and sabotage of federal infrastructure. The house seemed to freeze. Daniel's mouth fell open, confusion hardening into horror. What? No, there's some mistake, he stammered, looking at Aria. Aria's mask cracked. She laughed, sharp and brittle, eyes flashing. Do you hear yourself? This is your mother's game. She's poisoned you against me since the beginning. You think I'd risk everything for money? Noor dropped a folder onto the desk, photographs of Accelerants planted under the cliffs, audio transcripts of her calls with Marcus, bank trails leading to shell companies. Proof so heavy it crushed every syllable of her denial. Daniel staggered back, color draining from his face. Aria, tell me this isn't real. For the first time, her eyes lost their sweetness. She looked at him the way a hunter looks at an animal that's outlived its usefulness. Cold, calculating, silent. That silence was louder than any confession. 2 agents moved in, snapping cuffs around her wrists. She thrashed, spitting venom. You'll regret this, old woman. He'll never forgive you. I stepped closer, calm as the tide. No, Aria. He'll thank me because I just saved his life. Daniel's knees buckled. He sank into a chair, staring at the woman he'd almost married, the woman who'd nearly turned his life into ash. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the room like a stage. And for the first time in years, I felt the power shift back into my hands. The net had closed. The predator was caught. The night after Aria's arrest, the villa felt heavier than the storm itself. The walls still echoed with her laughter, half honey, half venom. The cameras were silent now, but I could swear they hummed with everything they'd witnessed. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. His hands trembled as he turned the evidence files over and over, like touching the pages might change the words written on them. She tried to kill you, he whispered finally, voice raw. The fire that destroyed your house, that wasn't an accident. And she was planning to kill me too, once she got your inheritance. I watched my son break in front of me, the way tectonic plates crack under unbearable pressure. He pressed his palms into his eyes, shaking his head. I chose her over you. When you needed me most, I told you to sleep in a boat, and all along she was sharpening the knife. Guilt rolled off him in waves so thick I could almost drown in it. For months, I'd carried my own grief like a stone in my chest. Now I saw he'd been carrying his, too, just hidden under her spell. I placed my hand gently over his. Daniel, you weren't weak, you were targeted. She studied you, manipulated you. It wasn't love, it was a con. His eyes, bloodshot and wet, lifted to mine. But I let her erase you. What kind of son does that? I squeezed his hand. A son who still has a mother, that's what kind, and I'm not going anywhere. We sat there in silence, broken but breathing, while outside the storm's fury dissolved into calm drizzle. The next morning, the official charges hit the news feeds. Ava Volkov, alias Aria Vale, indicted for fraud, arson, and attempted murder. Marcus, her shadow partner, was still at large, but warrants were out. For the first time, I felt the system grinding toward justice, slow but steady. Daniel didn't leave. He moved into the villa's guest wing, too shaken to return to the commune. Therapy sessions began, federal counselors teaching him how to untangle manipulation from memory. Each night, he'd knock softly at my door before bed, as if to prove to both of us he was still there. I'd lost my house. I'd nearly lost my son. But now, sitting on the cliffside balcony watching dawn spread across the sea, I realized something. Storms don't just destroy, they clear. And from that clearing, you can begin again. 6 months later, the villa's windows reflected not storm clouds, but spring light. By then, Daniel had color back in his cheeks, though shame still lingered like a scar. And I was no longer the woman who once curled up in a rescue dinghy whispering to the tide. The federal courthouse in Seattle smelled of marble polish and nerves. The benches overflowed with journalists, victims from other states, and strangers hungry for scandal. At the center of it all sat Aria Vale, Ava Volkov in shackles, dressed in gray prison garb instead of white linen. She carried herself with the same elegance, but now it looked brittle like porcelain with spiderweb cracks. The prosecutor laid it out like a map: fraud across 3 states, dozens of fake businesses, arson for-profit schemes, attempted murder of me and Daniel. Every slide projected on the screen was another nail in her coffin. The jury flinched at the recordings, her voice cold as iron. Collateral. The fire will look like faulty wiring. Tragic accident, no survivors. Daniel sat beside me, rigid, fists clenched. When the judge allowed victim statements, he stood. His voice wavered but did not break. I believed her. I chose her over my own mother, and she would have killed me for it. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, but I know I'll never forgive her. He turned, meeting Aria's gaze for the first time since that stormy night. You didn't just steal money. You stole my trust, my years, my father's memory, and you almost stole my mother's life. I want you to hear that every single day in your cell. Aria didn't blink, but I saw the faintest twitch in her jaw, the crack widening. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, steady, shoulders squared. I lost everything in that fire, not just a home, but my history, my dignity. My son turned his back on me because of your poison, and still, I survived. You thought you could erase me, but I stand here whole, stronger, louder, and I will not be silent again. The words rang in the marble chamber like a tide crashing against stone. The verdict came fast, guilty on all counts, life imprisonment without parole. The gavel's crack was softer than the thunder that night, but it carried more finality. As marshals led Aria away, she turned once, her eyes locking on me. No more mask, no more honey, just raw, helpless fury. And for the first time I smiled, not in malice, but in victory, because justice had spoken. When we walked out into the spring sunlight, Daniel slipped his hand into mine. No words, no promises, just a grip, steady, unshakable. For the first time in years, it felt like family again. When the trial ended, people expected me to disappear back into quiet anonymity, an old widow clinging to her fortune. But I had walked through fire, through exile, through betrayal by my own blood. I wasn't going to vanish. I was going to transform. I used part of Aunt Isabella's inheritance to create the Quang Reyes Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to 2 things: mapping danger zones across the new floating districts so no family would lose their home to accidents like mine. Education against manipulation, teaching young engineers, widows, anyone vulnerable how to recognize the red flags of psychological control. People called me the cartographer who maps both oceans and lies. I wore that title proudly. My villa on the cliff stopped being just a fortress. It became a hub. Community meetings in the great room, data servers in the study humming with flood mapping projects, students sipping coffee in the kitchen as they learned to chart currents. The same walls that once recorded Aria's deceit now echoed with plans to protect others. And Daniel, my Daniel, began to heal. Therapy helped, yes, but what really changed him was purpose. He left the commune behind and poured himself into his own work, redesigning tidal turbines that could withstand climate storms. The boy who once fell for a con artist was becoming a man who built resilience for entire communities. One evening, as pelicans skimmed the waves below, he joined me on the balcony. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you ever think about her, about Aria?" I sipped my tea, watching the horizon. Sometimes, but only the way a sailor remembers a storm, not to mourn it, but to respect what it taught. He nodded. "I don't want to be defined by what she did to me." "You won't," I told him. "We're not her victims, Daniel. We're survivors, and survivors build." For the first time in years, his smile reached his eyes. The ocean still roared, storms still came, but they no longer terrified me. They reminded me of who I had become, a woman who had lost everything and mapped her way back, stronger, louder, unshakable. And with my son beside me, we were no longer haunted. We were free. News travels differently in 2049. Not through papers or television, but through streams that pulse across every floating city and digital hub. My story, once whispered in marina docks and courtrooms, was now amplified on global feeds. Widow turns fortune into shield for the vulnerable. The Quang Reyes Foundation grew faster than even I expected. Within a year, our coastal danger maps were adopted by 3 Pacific nations. Shipping companies consulted our tide simulations to avoid wrecks. Community leaders invited us to teach emotional navigation, a program blending psychology and cartography metaphors, showing people how to chart their way out of manipulation before it became fatal. Invitations arrived like waves. A conference in Copenhagen, a symposium in Manila, a UN forum in Geneva where they introduced me as the cartographer of resilience. I stood at a podium before world leaders, telling them how predators don't always come with guns or knives. Sometimes they come with soft smiles and false promises, and how systems must adapt to protect the vulnerable. To my surprise, the words struck a chord. Survivors wrote me from Lagos, from Mumbai, from Buenos Aires. I thought I was alone. Your story gave me courage. Some had escaped cults, others abusive partners, others fraudulent wellness communes eerily similar to Aria's. And Daniel, he became more than an engineer. He became my partner in expansion. While I traveled to speak, he led technical teams designing low-cost monitoring buoys that warned entire coastlines of structural sabotage. He once told me, "I can't undo my mistakes, but I can build something stronger out of them." One evening, after I spoke in Manila, a young woman approached me. Her hands shook as she said, "Your story saved my mother. She was about to sign her property into a false commune's name. I showed her your speech." She stopped. Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't know us, but you saved us." In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about reclaiming my own life. It was about expansion, taking one woman's fire-forged survival and turning it into a lighthouse for countless others. The ocean below my cliffside home no longer looked threatening. It looked like a map, alive, ever-changing, waiting to be charted. And my voice, once silenced by manipulation and fire, now carried across continents. The years that followed felt less like a battle and more like a tide finally turning. My name appeared in journals, my foundation in headlines, but none of that mattered as much as the quiet evenings back on the cliffside villa. I had rebuilt not just walls, but myself. The woman who once curled up in the cabin of a sinking skiff was gone. In her place stood someone who had mapped grief, betrayal, survival, and justice into a living atlas. One spring morning, I walked barefoot down to the rocks below the villa. The storm debris was gone, replaced by tide pools shimmering with new life, anemones opening like small galaxies, starfish clinging stubbornly to stone. Nature's way of saying, even after fire and flood, life returns. Daniel met me there, boots crunching on the pebbles. He was taller in spirit now, his shoulders squared not by arrogance but by hard-earned humility. He handed me a mug of coffee and smiled. "Mom, it feels like we made it." I nodded, watching the horizon where the sea kissed the sky. "We did, and we'll keep making it, one tide at a time." For a moment, we stood in silence, not the silence of absence, the kind Aria once carved into our lives, but the silence of peace. Above us, the lighthouse beacon blinked, a rhythm steady and calm. Not a warning anymore, but a reminder. Storms pass, but the light endures. I closed my eyes, letting the salt air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself, sometimes survival isn't about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go and trusting that the tide will bring you back to shore. And in that moment, I was finally home.